Welcome to and thank you for stopping by another Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. It's your ever humble host Jake here, bringing more of a menace and a monster, and one that actually meshes quite well with the anime theme I've got going on with Full Build Friday. This week features an Aijutsu themed warrior, the Stormblade Duelist. Before we get into it, I'd like to take a quick second to play the YouTube game and ask you to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. With that said, let me give a little background on the Stormblade Duelist here. As I mentioned, the Stormblade Duelist is built, and was originally named, after Aijutsu and Aido, a combat style or practice on swiftly drawing and striking, all in one flowing motion. While this has a basis in real life, I obviously leaned into some more fantastical and exaggerated aspects of it, such as those found in shows and even movies. Additionally, I opted to brand it with the name of Stormblade Duelist, stepping away from the real-world languages to make it easier to slot into other worlds. The name itself is based on the idea of the duelist drawing and striking with such speed that their blade looks like a bolt of silver lightning. I also tried to stick to themes and terminology of storms and the like when it comes to naming its abilities. Getting into the more mechanical matters, I made the Stormblade into a level 7 creature for two reasons. Firstly, it seemed like there was a slight lack of level 7 NPCs over on the Archives of Menace. Secondly, it is a reference to the classic samurai movie, The Seven Samurai. Now, as is tradition, I only assigned this martial menace the humanoid trait, leaving you free to make anything from a human to a goblin to even a Konrasu Stormblade Duelist. There are some serious soldier aspects in the design of the Stormblade Duelist, and with the katana lacking the finesse trait, the duelist will start off with a high strength, allowing it to properly wield its blade. However, there's a grace to Aijutsu that leads me to using a moderate dexterity, along with a moderate wisdom, based on the mental fortitude often associated with it, with the Stormblade seeking a state of zen. Its remaining ability scores are not as imperative to its build, and all use a low bonus. From there, it has a high perception bonus based on its more moderate wisdom, as well as the fact that the Stormblade must remain keenly aware of itself and its surroundings, in constant search of the perfect moment to strike. That leaves us with its skills. At the top is a high intimidation with the intent of using it to unnerve opponents, while its acrobatics and athletics are merely moderate. There are physical skills, which are the duelist's specialty, but they don't really come up in its build that much. It closes out with low nature, performance, and society skills, which are all mostly thematic. I especially like the image of the samurai playing the flute or something similar while awaiting a foe in a serene setting. Despite not wearing armor, I do envision the Stormblade Duelist as a nimble combatant, and as such I assigned it a high armor class, though that is balanced out with only a moderate pool of hit points. It's that low constitution coming back with a vengeance, which we also see with it only using a low fortitude save. While its wisdom and dexterity are both higher, I distinguish them with a moderate will save and then a high reflex save. Although the duelist is more physically inclined, I went with the moderate wisdom to call to mind the meditation and introspection that comes from studying this method of combat. Finally, the duelist is all about striking swiftly and suddenly, so reflex is obviously going to be its highest bonus from among its saving throws. When it comes to combat, the Stormblade has two strikes. Both of these strikes use a high attack bonus, but of these, its katana is much more important. Since that is the case, I'll start with discussing the longbow. This was a classic weapon of the samurai, and is mainly intended to provide the duelist with a ranged weapon should the need arise. It's a point below low damage, but comes with a whole host of traits for the duelist to make use of, including the deadly trait, which it shares with the katana. Normally the katana deals in between low and moderate damage, but the two-hand trait gets it up to about high damage. Plus, there's the aforementioned deadly trait that it has a good chance of pulling off. However, the duelist cannot just swing wildly with his sword. It must plan and strike when the moment is right, as we'll see with its abilities. Now, despite being a standard monster ability and something that even players can access, Reactive Strike is a foundational aspect of the Stormblade Duelist. By itself, it can serve to represent the heightened reflexes that the Stormblade requires for its fighting style, but it's still a long ways off from actually representing the draw and strike that it's known for. For that, we turn to Gathering Storm Stance. Like many stances, this is a single action that can only be used in combat. But unlike those many monk stances, this does not grant a unique unarmed strike. Instead, its initial use lets the Stormblade sheath its katana without incurring any reactions, an important component for just general functionality and keeping our samurai from being cut down prematurely. After all, that's its shtick. This stance then heavily modifies reactive strike, to allow the Stormblade to cut down those that seek to enact violence against it. Given the readiness that the Stormblade enacts in preparing for this strike, it does get a +2 on its attack, increasing it to an extreme bonus for a single fleeting second. However, taking this strike, or even drawing its katana, causes the Stormblade to then leave this stance. Either way, the Stormblade has to spend an action around to get back into the stance each time. Between that and its reliance on reactions, the stun condition can spell a swift end for the Swordmaster. However, if the Stormblade can execute that perfect strike, if it can land a critical hit, it can trigger its flow like water free action. As cleanly as it strikes, the Stormblade settles back into Gathering Storm stance and gains a fresh new reaction to potentially unleash another strike. This has the opportunity to be terrifying if you can start chaining crits, which might mean that the players have to simply back off and develop a new strategy against the Duelist. And if the heroes do pull back and try to develop or deploy such strategies, the Stormblade has some tactics of its own to adapt with. Split the Sky works some mobility into the Stormblade's kit, granting our steel-slinging samurai a stride and strike. This doesn't seem like much, since you could just spend the interval actions to do it, but that's because its effects aren't immediately apparent. Harkening back to Kurosawa's Sanjuro film, and even a few animes, the cut left by the strike is so fine it doesn't even seem to leave a wound. However, at the end of the creature's next turn, the wound suddenly opens as they take 2 dice worth of weapon damage and release a spray of blood. I debated having this inflict persistent bleed damage, but that just didn't sit right with me. There is another part of me that feels this ability could use a slight buff, but I'm going to err on the side of caution this time around. As another option, if the Stormblade is the one taking a beating for whatever reason, it can cut through the rain and turn its meditative focus inwards. Doing so steals the Stormblade, providing with temporary HP that, when taken in conjunction with its moderate HP, gets it to right about high hit points. This value is based on those suggested for a creature with regeneration, with some adjustments made for 2 reasons. The first is that this does take an action to be used to bolster itself in the first place, and the second is that the Stormblade then cannot use this action again until it scores a critical hit on its attack. Effectively, it needs to see the fruits of its labor and focus before it can reap them once more. Finally, after a Stormblade has bloodied a foe, it can use Cleansing Rain. This ability is inspired by the possibly apocryphal claim that samurais couldn't sheath their blades while they were still stained or dirty. So, this lets the Stormblade clean its sword while also possibly granting it an edge in battle. Though I do worry that something about this feels a little dishonorable to me, and that doesn't entirely mesh with my idea for the Stormblade. My test subjects convinced me to keep it, so it is a single action that has a chance to dazzle a creature if they don't succeed on their saving throw against a high DC reflex save. This is a handy but relatively minor condition, but the only way that it can be cleared is through an interact action, which a Stormblade can take advantage of with reactive strike should they feel so inclined. That about closes out our discussion on this deft Duelist. A student of the sword, this superb samurai strikes like a storm, sweeping straight through saboteurs in a startling show of speed and skill that is certain to leave such saps severely shocked. I had a lot of fun with this design, challenging myself to build a creature that has shifted a lot of its power outside of its actual turn. I'm pretty happy with it overall, and I think it could be a very versatile encounter. You could include it in a proper duel using that subsystem, run it as a random duelist out to test his strength and skill, or even make it a semi-early sort of mini-boss, perhaps as a bodyguard for an entirely different enemies that the heroes must find their way around to strike at their true foe. Let me know what you think of this monster and what other creatures you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see on the channel and want to see more, check out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.